I used to tell myself I didn't care what they thought, that their opinions had no weight anymore. But standing alone in my glass-walled office, high above the hum of the city, I knew that was only half true. The skyline stretched endlessly beyond the windows. Steel, light, motion, everything I had built without them. My phone vibrated once, then again. An email from my younger sister. Dad was laid off. Mom's medical bills are piling up. I know you're struggling too, but if there's any way you can help, even a little. I let out a short, dry laugh. If only she knew how carefully that illusion had been maintained. 12 years earlier, I was 16, clutching a future I dared to want. The acceptance letter sat on our battered coffee table, its edges already curling. I had reread it so many times the words felt etched into my bones. A chance, a door cracked open. My father didn't see opportunity, he saw betrayal. "That's not a real profession," he snapped, shaking the letter like it offended him. "You'll throw your life away chasing fantasies." My mother stood near the window, silent as always. When voices rose, she shrank. When decisions were made, she disappeared. "I have a scholarship," I said quietly. "I've been saving. I can make this work." "No," he replied flatly. "You'll choose something practical, like your sister did. End of discussion." But for the first time in my life, something inside me refused to fold. No. The word landed between us like shattered glass. His face darkened. "Then leave," he said. "If you think you're so independent, prove it, and don't come back when you fail." That night, I packed what little I owned into a worn duffel bag. My sister watched from the hallway, stunned. "You're really doing this?" she whispered. "I have to," I said. "If I stay, I'll disappear." A soft emotional shift, an intimate moment. As I zipped the bag closed, my mother slipped into the room. She didn't argue. She never did. Instead, she pressed a small velvet pouch into my hand. "This belonged to your aunt," she murmured. "She said you'd know when it was time." Inside was a silver pendant, a tiny key, and a folded note. I didn't read it until later, alone in a cheap roadside motel. "If you're reading this, you've chosen yourself. I'm already proud of you." That was the moment I stopped looking back, and it was only the beginning of what that small key would unlock. The key felt heavier than it should have for something so small. It sat in my palm the next morning as I stood inside a quiet credit union lobby, fluorescent lights humming softly overhead. I had barely slept. Aunt Sophia's note replayed in my mind over and over, each word stirring questions I didn't yet know how to ask. The clerk slid a narrow metal box across the counter and left me alone in a private room. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. Inside wasn't cash. There were no stacks of money or dramatic revelations, at least not at first glance. Just several pieces of old silver jewelry carefully wrapped, a bundle of documents tied with twine, and another letter written in the same looping handwriting I remembered from childhood birthday cards. The letter told a story no one had ever shared with me. Aunt Sophia hadn't been a quiet hobbyist collecting trinkets for fun. Decades earlier, she'd been deeply embedded in the antique trade, buying, restoring, and quietly acquiring rare pieces most people overlooked. She understood value in a way few people ever did, and she had spent her life protecting that knowledge from those who would dismiss it. "These aren't ornaments," the letter said. "They're foundations." She gave me one instruction: take the pieces to a man named Marco. He would know what to do. I nearly walked out of that shop an hour later in a daze. Marco examined each item slowly, respectfully, like they were living things. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed. "These are exceptional," he said, "and very real." The valuation made my knees go weak. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. But what came next mattered more than the number. "You have a sharp eye," he told me. "That's not something you learn. Ever thought about doing this for real?" That single question altered the direction of my life. Marco didn't just appraise the pieces, he mentored me. He taught me how to recognize craftsmanship beneath tarnish, how to read old records, how to tell the difference between imitation and history. I learned patience, precision, silence. I discovered that the world was full of hidden worth, objects dismissed, stories forgotten, value buried under dust. By 19, I launched a small online shop. Nothing flashy, no name recognition, just quiet consistency. By my early 20s, I opened a modest storefront, then another, then something bigger. I kept my life deliberately small on the outside. No announcements, no explanations. Let them think I struggled. Let them underestimate me. It was safer that way. Years passed. The business grew. So did my resolve. Until one email cracked open the past I thought I'd outgrown. My sister asking for help. My parents on the brink of losing everything. And suddenly, all that hidden success had a decision to make. Because when they finally walked into my world, they expected excuses, not the truth waiting for them 30 floors above the city. I told my sister to bring them all. Mom, Dad, every document they had. There was a long pause on the phone, followed by an uncertain laugh. She thought I was exaggerating, maybe even pretending. In her mind, I still worked odd jobs, lived small, stayed invisible. I had spent years making sure that version of me was the only one they saw. At exactly 9 the next morning, I stood near the windows of my office, watching a familiar, weathered SUV pull into the private entrance below. Even from that height, I could feel their hesitation. Security escorted them past the public lobby, straight toward the executive elevator. That alone unsettled them. When the doors opened, the silence was immediate. My father stopped mid-step, eyes scanning the space as if waiting for someone to correct a mistake. Polished floors, curated art, glass cases holding pieces most people would only see in museums, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city like a quiet declaration. My mother's hand tightened around her purse strap. My sister blinked, frozen. "This is your office?" my mother whispered. I nodded. "Welcome." Confusion flickered across my father's face before hardening into disbelief. "This isn't funny. You work retail. You said so." "I said what was convenient," I replied calmly. I watched the realization hit them in stages: recognition, shock, resistance. I gestured toward a display case beside my desk. That brooch was once mistaken for costume jewelry. I bought it for less than $1,000. It's now worth more than your house. My sister's mouth opened, then closed. No sound came out. "The building?" she finally asked. I met her eyes. Mine. That was when anger surfaced. "You hid this from us?" my father snapped. "All this time?" "No," I said evenly. "I protected it." I took a seat behind my desk and motioned to the folder in his hands. "Let's talk about why you're here." The room fell silent as I laid everything out: missed payments, compounding debt, risky decisions made in desperation. There was nowhere to hide anymore. Every number was real, every consequence visible. "You knew," he said hoarsely. "You watched us sink." "Yes," I replied. "Because 10 years ago you told me not to come back when I failed." I stood and walked to the window, the city stretching endlessly beyond the glass. "I didn't fail," I said softly. "I just didn't need your permission to succeed." Hope flickered across their faces when I mentioned I could fix everything. Then I raised my hand. "But help isn't free, not this time." The air shifted. They leaned forward, waiting. And that's when I told them the conditions, the rules that would change all of our lives forever. What I demanded next shocked them more than my bank balance ever could, and it forced each of them to face a truth they'd spent years avoiding. Hope has a sound. I heard it in the way my mother inhaled sharply when I said I could erase every debt. I saw it in my sister's trembling hands. Even my father, so rigid, so certain, leaned forward just slightly, as if gravity itself had shifted in his favor. I let that moment breathe. Then I closed it. "I'll cover everything," I said evenly. "The house, the loans, the medical bills, all of it." Relief rushed toward them like a wave until I raised my hand. "But there are conditions." The room stiffened. My father straightened in his chair, already bracing for negotiation. He had always believed everything could be argued down, that money was leverage. He was wrong. "First," I said, meeting his eyes, "you're retiring, fully. No more trading, no more one last deal. You've spent years chasing control and calling it strategy. It ends now." His jaw tightened, pride flaring, then dimming. Slowly, he nodded. "Second," I turned to my sister, "you're walking away from the condo project. It's draining you and burying you at the same time." Her eyes widened. "But that's my escape plan?" I finished gently. "No, it's a trap." She swallowed hard. "You're enrolling in the music therapy program you abandoned, the one you loved before you chose what looked safe." A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "Third," I said, turning to my mother, "you're opening the bookstore." Her breath caught. "That was just a dream," she whispered. "No, it was a sacrifice, and it's overdue." For a moment, none of them spoke. Years of buried wants hovered in the air, fragile and exposed. "And finally," I said quietly, "we're going to therapy, together, weekly." My father started to protest. My mother placed her hand over his. "All of it," she said softly. I pressed a button on my desk. Moments later, thick folders were placed in front of them. Contracts, trusts, timelines, not gifts, structures. "Take these home," I said. "Read everything. If you sign, we move forward. If you don't, I step back." As they stood to leave, my father paused at the door. "I was wrong," he said, voice low. "About you." I didn't respond right away. "I never failed. I just succeeded without you." They left quietly. I stood alone again, watching their car disappear into traffic, feeling something unexpected settle in my chest. Not victory, not revenge. Closure. But healing doesn't happen in a single conversation. It unfolds in what comes after. Because the next morning, when they returned with signed papers, I realized the hardest part wasn't saving them, it was deciding who I would become once I stopped hiding. They came back the next morning quietly. No arguments, no posturing, just signed documents, careful smiles, and the weight of something unfamiliar settling between us. Accountability. The contracts were official now. There was no undoing what we had agreed to. And for the first time, neither was there fear. Change didn't arrive all at once. It never does. It came in small, deliberate steps. My father actually retired. Not the half-hearted version he'd promised before, but a real one. One morning, over coffee, he apologized. Not defensively, not with conditions, but plainly. I didn't cry, but something inside me finally loosened its grip. My mother opened her bookstore near the water, a cozy place filled with dog-eared novels, handwritten recommendations, and quiet joy. Watching her stand behind the counter, confident, alive, felt like witnessing a version of her that had been waiting decades to exist. My sister walked away from the deal that was draining her spirit and enrolled in the program she once loved. Her laughter changed. It sounded lighter, real. And me? I stopped pretending. No more shrinking my life to protect old narratives, no more playing small so others wouldn't feel threatened. I kept building, but openly now, with intention, with peace. On my desk sits a small jewelry box. Inside is the one piece I never sold, a simple locket worn smooth by time. Inside it, my aunt's photo, her note still folded carefully behind it. True worth is often invisible to those who never learned how to look. She was right. The rarest thing I ever uncovered wasn't hidden in a vault or buried beneath dust. It was my own value, the one I almost abandoned trying to earn approval that was never coming. I didn't share this story for sympathy or validation. I shared it because so many people are told to wait, to obey, to become smaller until permission arrives. It doesn't. You choose yourself first, even when it's lonely, especially then. One day, the people who doubted you may finally see what you've built, but by that time, their approval won't matter. You'll already have your own. If you're still walking alone, still building quietly, still doubting yourself, this is your sign. Keep going. The silence won't last forever, and the life you're creating will one day speak for you.